Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's wellness webinar. My name is Joshua Zeb. I'll be going through health savings accounts and the big impact on perhaps having one. Again, appreciate everyone joining. As you can tell, if you've been from some of our previous webinars, you can notice that we are using a different platform now. We think this is very intuitive, easier to use, of course, and we always encourage people to get engaged with us. If you notice on the screen, it does look a little bit different than maybe what you are used to. So just look around a little bit. You'll be able to ask questions. You'll be able to meet with an advisor as well. You'll see some related content as well on the website. And then you can see some of the things that you'll be able to download as well. So again, really appreciate everyone being on here. Again, feel free to ask any questions, or if you want to meet with us after today's webinar, me and my team are more than happy to do so. As I mentioned, my name is Joshua Zeb. I am a financial consultant and advisor at Prime Capital Wellness. We thought this was a very important topic to go through for September. And that being said, a lot of the reasons why is health savings accounts are a huge impact, or at least they can be, on what we can maybe use it for, not just for today from some medical expenses, but perhaps in the future. And that can be a huge benefit for those who are maybe close or into retirement. So a couple things that we always like to address and kind of set the table for is, things that I think we need to think about in the back of our mind when it comes to healthcare. A couple things I always shed some light on, which I think is always important, is, I think people are generally getting a little bit more healthy. People are living longer. So we usually expect people to have maybe a 20 to 25 year retirement, of course, because of the fact of that. If you look at any of the statistics, they will back up some of this stuff of people are generally living somewhat longer. So of course, living longer, especially, in your retirement years, we need to focus in on, not just funding retirement, but the healthcare side of things too, right? On top of that, as probably most of you probably are aware, is healthcare costs are increasing over time. So I don't think there's any surprise by anybody there. Employers are anticipating about 8 to 9% cost increase annually, which I think was pretty interesting. Higher deductibles, of course, higher out-of-pocket costs. I wrote down a couple, actually, I wanted to share with you, which I thought was very important to kind of shed some light on. First off, right now, if you're 65 or close to 65, your expected amount you'll pay in retirement for healthcare alone is about $172,000. So again, that's for the full length of retirement, but that's if you're 65 today. Well, if you're not 65 today, maybe you're a little bit younger than that. Maybe that number might be a little bit higher, right? So we really need to think about healthcare costs as a big, important expense for those retirement years, perhaps. And as probably most of you are aware, so there are, of course, complications and misunderstandings with the healthcare system. And, there's so many different terms that you might have heard of before, but aren't sure about. So, it's so important to know, of course, what kind of health insurance plan you're on. What are your co-payments? What are your out-of-pocket expenses could be? Prescription drugs. It's really important. And I highly encourage everyone that if you're not sure, maybe go back to your benefits individual and maybe reach out and just maybe get some explanation so you guys all know, of course, how you are signed up. And why is this so important? We wanted to kind of go back to the health savings account aspect of how this can generally impact a lot of people that are on those high deductible health plans. So what is a health savings account really? It's a tax advantage account created for individuals with those high deductible plans. It's a great way to put away some money to save for some medical expenses that those high deductible plans do not cover. So contributions are made into this account by the individual and perhaps the individual's employer as well. There's a maximum per year that we'll go through, but it's a great way of, again, a savings account for these healthcare expenses. There is an investment component too, which we'll go into, which I think is very impactful and very interesting that some of you might not be aware of. So before we go into that, let's just kind of make sure we all know the president of these health savings accounts. So as we get forward into the presentation, we want to go through eligibility, right? So who can open up an HSA, a health savings account? You know, what kind of high deductible health plan do you have, of course? So let's look at these four requirements here. So qualified per the IRS, you must have a high deductible health plan, no other health coverage, not enrolled in Medicare, and not a dependent in someone else's tax return. So again, maybe go back to your employer and see if you are in a high deductible health plan, see if they have a health savings account as an option for you. Could be very impactful. A couple things, if you're not really sure if you have a high deductible or not, well, we wanted to put those parameters in here for you. So for individuals, a high deductible health plan has a minimum and maximum right here. For, again, individuals is 1,650 to 8,300 respectively. These tend to change over the years, so just kind of be up to date with that. For families, you can see the minimum is 3,300 and the maximums are 16,600. Individuals who are not insured by their employer still can open up an HSA on their own at a number of financial institutions. So really important for everybody on the webinar to kind of know that. And some of you probably have some kind of open enrollment in the next couple of months. So this might be a question to ask or might find out more about. So again, big aspect here is the high deductible health plan in order to open up the health savings account. As we move forward, we wanted to go through the contribution limits. So what's really important here is, you know, there's a set maximum amount. Of course, you can see that on the screen for 2025, this, for a self-only HSA contribution limit. So for an individual, that's $4,300. For a family, that's going to be $8,550. Now, again, these are the maximum amounts. So you don't have to go all the way up to the maximum. You can certainly choose your own contribution amount you want. It could be $50 a month, could be $100 a month, whatever you would like that you, of course, can afford. That's probably the bottom line, is what makes sense for your financial situation. If you can notice here, we also put on the 2024 number. So if you could tell, these limits can vary and probably increase over time. So just kind of keep an eye on that. A couple other things we want to make sure people are aware of is people who are over the age of 55, they can actually have a catch-up contribution of an additional $1,000 that can go into their health savings account. On top of that, we mentioned a couple slides ago that you can contribute inside the HSA or your HSA, but so can the employer. So that might be something to ask about them of what would that look like. Is it going to be a dollar amount or a set percentage, or is it a one-time contribution inside of the account for you? So I think that's a very big employer benefit for all of you that might have the potential to have an HSA if you don't already. One other thing too that I wanted to mention is with these limits, it does consider your contributions and the employer contributions into these limits. So if your employer is putting in, you know, half of the maximum, you can only put in, of course, the other half, right, to add up to that 4,300. So make sure you understand that kind of going into your open enrollment if you guys are thinking about or have an HSA available. One other big impact on the health savings account is, yes, we can use these for some medical expenses in the short term, which is great. That's a great, useful tool for those qualified medical expenses. Well, if there's years where we're generally pretty healthy, maybe we don't need the dollars necessarily, but they're still accumulating over time, Well, this account will roll over year by year. So the money you don't use will still accumulate over time. So think about this again as it's a savings account, not necessarily a spending account. So for some people, this is just another kind of nugget or nest egg of an account you can have for long-term savings. And we'll go into kind of some of the benefits of that. But again, rolls over year to year. That's different from a FSA, which is a flexible savings account. So just make sure you know the difference between the two of FSA and HSA. With the HSA, you can have that money rolled over year by year. Another important thing to consider or know about these health savings accounts is if you have one open, if you're contributing to it, if you have balance to it, if you leave your employer and you're not sure what happens, that money stays with you. So it's not a use it or lose it, or if you leave, the money goes away, the money is yours. So that is a very big impact of what the HSA could have, especially thinking about those who are maybe on the younger side, who have maybe 20 to 30 years until retirement. Again, think about this as maybe another long-term savings account for yourself. So one big thing, of course, is, this is a health savings account. It's used for these medical expenses. So what qualifies for these medical expenses I can use these dollars for? So they're called qualified medical expenses. And I definitely encourage those who really wants to see the full list, Google it. There's quite a bit of different selections on there. So I named a couple just for good reference here. So expenses can include deductibles, dental services, vision care, prescription drugs, psychiatric treatments, things that maybe aren't covered by your health insurance already. Insurance premiums usually don't count toward those qualified medical expenses. So again, you probably can't use these for premium payments, but important to know that for those who are maybe asking about that. And again, the big thing here is qualified medical expenses. There are probably some expenses that aren't qualified. So any distribution from an HSA that is for a reason that's not part of these qualified medical expenses, will be subject to income tax and then an additional 20% penalty on top of that. So again, that's so important for those who have an HSA or thinking about opening one is, okay, what can I use this on? Is this a big benefit to me now? Is it going to be a benefit maybe later down the road? What are some things that are maybe not available for these HSA qualified medical expenses? I wrote a couple of them down just that I didn't put on here, but I thought was pretty interesting that you probably are surprised that are covered. So a couple that I wanted to mention was postpartum care, which I thought was interesting. Chiropractic care. So if you go to a chiropractor, always ask if it's an HSA eligible expense, and physical exams as well. So some of those things maybe people use throughout the year. So an HSA might be able to help cover the expenses for that. Things that aren't covered and are part of that non-qualified medical expenses, again, that we can't necessarily use these HSA dollars for would be nutritional supplements, childcare, so you think about daycare, things like that, and then teeth whitening, which I thought was interesting. But please note that dental care and services was covered, but teeth whitening might be a little bit of a stretch for that. So just keep an eye on that, especially if you're considering using your HSA for a major expense. Again, we want to make sure it's qualified. We want to make sure that you get the benefit of that. One other thing that's always important that I always recommend people do is whenever you use those HSA dollars for these qualified medical expenses, well, let's keep the receipts for these items, right? Usually they say around 3 years worth of receipts, just in case the IRS comes back to you and kind of challenges what the expense was. You'll have that in your back pocket. Rhetorically speaking, at least, that you'll have these receipts in some safe, secure place. That way you'll have proof that this was for a qualified medical expense. So just keep an eye on that, or kind of think about that when it comes to these expenses from a year-to-year standpoint. All right. One big thing, I guess it's three big things, is the triple tax advantage of the HSA. So this is probably one of the biggest impacts of why people like health savings accounts or are considering opening them, is because of this. So the triple tax advantage, and again, there's no other accounts that I've seen that have this, of what this advantage does for you. So first thing is 100% deductible contributions to the legal mandated maximum amount. So think about it as just similar to maybe if you have a pre-tax retirement contribution. Well, this would be like a pre-tax health savings account contribution into your HSA, right? So pre-tax dollars are going into your HSA, if that makes sense, money that has not been taxed yet. Tax-free earnings. So I mentioned it a couple times, but there's a way to actually invest these HSA dollars for yourself, for maybe using it down the road. Again, if you're not using it now, it's a good way to have it as maybe an investment account or a savings account. So tax-free interest earnings as well. When we draw the money out for these qualified medical expenses, it does not fall into taxable income. So essentially they're tax-free withdrawals for these expenses, which is a huge, huge impact. Again, it goes in pre-tax. If you have it invested, it's tax-free earnings. And then if we use these dollars for those qualified medical expenses, well, it's not going to be considered a taxable event. So again, there's three huge benefits here just for qualified medical expenses, which, if you think about it, that's a good way of saving some money in the long run, especially if we have some big medical expenses down the road at retirement, or maybe if we're getting older. Maybe we don't need, again, those HSA dollars now, but if we keep contributing to it and it keeps adding, and if we have it invested, that's a good way to have a good chunk of money for these healthcare expenses, perhaps down the road. Okay, I've mentioned this several times, but with the HSA account, so if we think about our HSA account as a savings account, there is also an investment component to it. So of course, the idea is if we keep our money in cash, the whole idea is kind of liquidity. We can use the cash, the next day, during the year. So we have something, if we kind of expect to have these medical expenses that we want to use our HSA for, that's a good reason to have some money in cash in these accounts. Well, there is an investment component. I would make sure and that your HSA provider has a investment component, or if it does or not. Some of them have a minimum cash requirement that you have to have, like maybe it's $1,000 you have to have in cash before you can invest it, or maybe it's $2,000, or maybe there's no minimum cash component. Every HSA provider is going to be a little bit different with it. The investment options can vary depending on who the provider is, so I can't tell you how aggressive or conservative you can be or anything like that. But again, that's a good reason to go to your HSA provider if you have one, of is that an option for you? So one kind of thing that I always get the question of, okay, well, Josh, I have an HSA, I have a significant balance. Do I have to fully keep my money in cash, or do I have to fully invest it, or how does that work? Well, you actually, if you have the opportunity to invest it, you don't have to invest the full amount. So you can have some cash set aside. As I mentioned before, if you kind of expect some medical expenses in the foreseeable future, maybe the 1 to 2 years from now, just make sure you have enough cash or a cash in this account aside to cover those. And then if it's a high enough balance, maybe you can invest the rest. So again, very important impact there, is you can certainly do both, one or the other. A couple of considerations I always tell people when it comes to any kind of savings account, any kind of investment account, is it is a budgetary question. We always got to make sure that whatever we contribute inside of our retirement accounts or these health savings accounts makes sense for our budget, right? I'm always a huge advocate for everybody saving as many dollars as they can, but let's make sure it makes sense for us first. So maybe looking at your budget, see if you can set aside a certain amount per month or per paycheck that you can maybe put toward this health savings account. One other thing I always encourage people to do, and this is a more tricky thing, is again, if you expect to have some of these medical expenses in the near future, well, let's prepare for that and have that plan maybe ahead of time and plan on using the HSA if that's something we want to do with it. A couple other things I always want to make sure people know, and it's going to be this third bullet point if you see on the screen, which is under current tax law, once you reach age 65, whether or not you will no longer be subject to that 20% penalty for money withdrawn from non-qualified medical expenses. So what that really means is once you turn age 65 and you have an HSA, when you withdraw money for non-qualified medical expenses, again, you're not penalized, which is a huge, huge impact. You'll be taxed because, again, that was pre-tax money going in. But if it's for non-qualified medical expenses after age 65, you can use it as maybe kind of like a theoretical retirement bucket, right? So again, think about it as another way of having some long-term savings for yourself for retirement dollars. For some people, that might make sense to maybe not use it for non-qualified medical expenses, but still to use it for retirement when it comes to those maybe healthcare costs. I mentioned it on the third slide of how healthcare costs can be quite expensive for some people. So again, having an HSA, maybe you're not using it now, maybe you just want it to accumulate over time and invest. Well, again, those will be tax-free dollars if they're for those qualified medical expenses in retirement. Non-qualified expenses after age 65 will not be penalized, but they will be taxed. So just make sure we know the difference between the two going forward. So a lot of key takeaways. I think these are probably the four that I always want to address and make sure people understand. Number one, the balance can accumulate over time. I can't say it enough where, again, it's not if you don't use it, you lose it kind of situation. It accumulates over time, especially for those who are in your 20s, 30s, or 40s. If you're really not using this account, maybe you're relatively healthy, you don't necessarily have high medical expenses. These dollars will carry over for the next year and the year after that. So again, think about it as a long-term savings account if you don't use it, which is great. And again, if it's for those non-qualified medical expenses after 65, well, I only have to pay taxes on it. I'm not penalized on it. So it's essentially another type of account you can use for maybe retirement or retirement expenses that aren't medical. Secondly, qualified medical expenses are expanding. So that's why I encourage people to go on Google. I guarantee you there's probably not going to be, the same qualified medical expenses next year. I'm sure it'll expand because there's so many different things that people might want to use these dollars for. So the qualified medical expenses might be a little bit different than next year. That might be actually more because of it. Another way to potentially pay for those retirement expenses, like I mentioned before. So if you're thinking about other avenues to put away some money for retirement, this could be a way. This could be a way to, maybe you have a substantial amount in your HSA where we're only going to use it for healthcare costs. And maybe if we had a 401k or another retirement account, that's just going to be for living expenses, not healthcare. Our HSA will be for healthcare costs only. So again, that can be a huge impact, especially when you think about that triple tax advantage on those qualified medical expenses. And lastly is, obviously we want people to just see if that's an option for them. Big thing is the high deductible health plan. Make sure you have that. So there's a potential employer benefit for all of you, of course, to have this. And potentially they will put some money in for you too, which I'm not against having some free contributions inside a health savings account, of course. So definitely, these are the four takeaways. I hope everyone kind of gets for today's presentation. I wanted to do a couple more housekeeping items. As I mentioned before, if this is your first time in our wellness webinar series, we do have a monthly webinar series. So this is going to go to next month and month after this. So next month, October 29th, we're going to go through maximizing returns, minimizing taxes, smart investing strategies. Definitely encourage all of you to register on. These are recorded. So if you can't make it live, which I understand, this is during the workday, you guys are all busy. I highly encourage you to at least register so you get the recording after the fact. If you guys want a one-on-one session, you can certainly click the Ask Advisor on your screen, or you can scan this QR code I have put on the screen as well. If you want to have a conversation with us, it could certainly be about health savings accounts. Does it make sense for you to maybe keep it in cash, or maybe invest those dollars, or maybe go through your budget to see maybe what you can afford to put into your health savings account, or any other financial related question you might have. With that being said, I appreciate everyone's time today. Again, I know everyone's busy during the work week, and we really like how we have a live audience today. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and go to our next slide here with the disclosure, and I'm going to conclude our webinar. Again, my name is Joshua Zeb. Appreciate everyone being on here, and I look forward to seeing everyone here in the future. Take care.